Pryor. I'm the chair of the Lane Community College Board of Education, and I call this October 6th meeting of the Board of Education to order. I'm going to ask Tammy to call the roll.
Kelly Johnson,
Present.
Angela Van Cross, present. Mike Geister,
Here.
Steve Mattel,
Here.
Rosie Pryor,
Here.
Lisa Fragula,
Present. And we need to be aware that board member Austin Foldnaghy is endeavoring to connect online, experiencing technical difficulties, and expects to be so for about the next hour. So he will join us as he's able. So I'm going to exercise the prerogative of the chair, and I'm going to throw the entire meeting for a loop and change the order of things by calling on Mr. Carl Ye to introduce some students to us. First thing.
Thank you, President of the Board, Madam Rosie Pryor, and members of the board and President Bulger. It's my pleasure to introduce two of our student leaders of our Student Government Association. We have President Nikar Ramlakan and Vice President Amaya Karakaburu. And if it is with your permission, I think Amaya is going to read the land recognition, and I'll go ahead and allow her to do that. Thank you very much.
Hello. I'd like to start our meeting with the acknowledgement that the land we are on is the traditional homelands of the Kalapuya people. The Kalapuya were stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years before their traditional way of life was forever disrupted and destroyed. We start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants, the Kalapuya. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will hear more from our student guests later on in the meeting. I now need to ask members of the board if there are any changes or additions to the agenda tonight. There being none, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
That was Steve.
Okay.
Second from Holly.
Yes.
From Holly. All those in favor of adopting the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Do we need to call the roll? It was unanimous, except for Austin not being here. So we're going to move forward to the president's report.
Thank you. Be happy to. I want to begin by recognizing and wishing everyone a happy National Hispanic Heritage Month. This is a month that's an opportunity for us to recognize the contributions and influence of Hispanic Americans to the history, culture, and achievements of our country. So this is week 2 of the fall term. Week 1, the first day of the fall term, was really an exciting day for Lane Community College. So nice to have the students back on campus. The campus is all abuzz, and we're really, really excited for that. The kickoff to the fall semester was really the fall in-service, which happened on September 22nd. And there were more than 600 employees who participated. We had a keynote speaker, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, Sonia Nazario. We also mourned in September the loss of 2 employees, Brent Dumas and also Gary Britcher, one a faculty member and one a staff person. And we also mourn the loss of Roger Hall, who passed away in September. He and his wife started the Achievers Circle scholarships at the LCC Foundation, which still serves students today. I want to also recognize that Senator Jeff Merkley visited the campus in September, and he was talking to us about a community project funding request that he and Senator Wyden are supporting during this year's appropriations process, and we're certainly hopeful for that. As we move to October, there are a couple of announcements. One is we're looking forward to a groundbreaking for our new health professions building. That's at 9:00 a.m. on October 12th. And we're also looking forward to the work session, the board's work session in Florence on October 19th. And that ends my report.
Thank you, President Bulger. We're going to move on to public comment. We have several people who've signed up to speak this evening, and I need to learn if we have anyone online. 5 people. Okay. I think what we'll do then is we'll alternate if that works for you.
These 2 people signed up online.
Right here. Oh,
They're here. Yeah.
oh, they are here.
One person that signed up to speak on.
Oh, only one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The first person I'm going to call on is Mr. Tom Peck. Thank you for being here this evening. Before you speak, may I just say a couple of things, which I apologize for not doing so before now. The board has a policy that states the board does not respond directly to any issues raised, but will refer those issues to the president for appropriate action. And for anyone online, please use the raised hand feature and the meeting host will unmute your speaker and call on you in the order you joined the meeting. So sorry about that. Please.
It's quite all right.
welcome.
Thank you very much for allowing me to address you this evening. I'm going to speak on measure 114, which is the common sense gun safety measure that's on the November ballot. I know gun safety and talking about gun violence is not a fun thing to talk about, but it is an important issue. It's really gotten to epidemic proportions in Eugene and across Oregon. The gun deaths are mounting. In the United States, 50,000 people every year die of gun violence. In Oregon, about 500 people die of gun violence every year. And of those, about 400 of those people commit suicide using a gun. And of that number, a large majority of them are youth. Youth are dying at a very high rate. Suicide. Suicide is kind of a impulse decision. Some people have a bad day, a really bad day. Their boyfriend tells them goodbye and they think there's no tomorrow and they commit suicide. That's happening all around us. If you are part of the BIPOC community, the chances of being killed by gun violence are 4.5 times greater than white folks. And there are 400 million guns in the United States. There are more guns than there are people in the United States. This is like no other country in the industrial world. We are alone. We have more mass shootings than any other country. That we're off the chart. I think we're right about 500 mass shootings so far this year. And I think we're at about 6 in Oregon. What else? If you have a gun in your house, there's this big thing. You need guns to protect you and your family, put out by the NRA. And if you have a gun in your house, you're twice as likely to be killed by that gun. So measure 114, there's some parts I just want to go over. What it does is it slows down the gun purchase process. Right now, you can technically have a gun in your hand in 3 days. It slows it way down. So that impulse to harm oneself or somebody else is diminished greatly. Sheriffs have to evaluate you, sheriffs and trainers. So part of the measure is for a person to go through training on how to use a gun. It's not only classroom, but it's live training, how to use it safely, store it safely, which is a major problem in Oregon and around the country. And they evaluate the person to make sure this person is not a harm to themselves or other people. It tracks the gun owner, this is only for new gun purchases, so it tracks them and the gun. So if this gun's involved in an illegal activity, they can much more easily find the perpetrator.
Forgive me for interrupting you. Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay. Thank
We
you.
appreciate your testimony very much. Is there someone online? Okay, would our visitor online like to speak now?
Yes.
Okay, you're welcome to turn on your video if you wish, not required to do it.
Oh, another time. I don't have it available at the moment.
Okay, well, could you introduce yourself, please?
Okay, do I have to hit join as a panelist?
No.
No, okay. I'm David Eigel. The reason I'm contacting you is a rather offbeat matter. Since 2016, I've been involved in a matter of our local history, which has been gotten wrong severely. This is the 150th year of a man who was born and raised here. He was at age 19. He graduated from the University of Oregon as its valedictorian and then went off to Harvard College. He was the son of our second mayor, and his family were noted for being their family being among the most rigorous and heroic and courageous abolitionists in the United States. They were among us, his grandparents were among a select few who left Illinois, in this case, saying goodbye to their personal friend, Abraham Lincoln. They moved to Bleeding, Kansas, where for years they dedicated their lives and risked their lives to free slaves. Professor Frederick Dunn is the man I'm talking about, who was the victim of Michael Schill's smear campaign. I've completely documented that the story that he's been passing around for years is fraudulent. It's not true. And I can show anyone who's interested of this fact. So I'm asking you, first of all, as individuals in a position to name buildings or do other things to honor leading citizens, to clearly take the time to examine the facts, which are all very well documented. You'll get to see such things as the vicious white supremacist Frederick Dunn, as he tells how he played the role of Little Harry, the black slave child in an 1875 production of Uncle Tom's Cabin, or how proud he is of his abolitionist ancestors in the press. You'll note that you will never find a statement where Dunn ever was leading the Klan or supporting the Klan or anything of this sort. It's all nonsense. Unfortunately, as I say, Mr. Schill got Greg Evans, your Vice President of Equity and Inclusion, to help him promote this nonsense. And I understand people make mistakes, but I've more than given him opportunities to correct the record, and I've sent materials to him. He's never challenged anything. I've offered him a $25,000 gift to the city for any cause he wants, if he could successfully support and defend the Dunn report, which he hasn't been able to do. Also, Ani Katz at KLCC has had some broadcasts where she supported this fake history. So I will be furnishing you with more materials than you would ever need to look at to be assured of the truth of what I'm saying. And I hope you'll join the cause because there's been a lot of pain in a lot of families because of this misinformation that's being spread about. And I hope we can deal with it now, honestly. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jim, is it Jagger?
Yes,
Welcome.
yes, thank you. Oh, yeah, I'm gonna.
Excuse me, if you just wait till you approach the microphone.
Right. It is more of a personal thing in some respect before I talk, and I realize you may run the 3 minutes, but I think you'll understand why I want to take a moment to say this. I haven't had a chance to do this. When I walked past the Dale Parnell loop, there's a reason why I get emotional. Went to the Nazarene church. Parnells did too. My younger brother dated Dale's daughter for a while. And I remember during lunches in the evenings, we would think, does this area really need a community college? This is pre-birth, okay? And I can remember those discussions, and I wasn't 5 years old. That's probably my 20s, something like that. And to come here and see this now, it's just, when you see it at the beginning and you wonder, is it going to make it? I mean, is there really a need for it? And you think now, how stupid were we to even think that there was not a need for something like this? So I applaud you all for being here and doing this, okay? So I'm here on 114, okay? And Mr. Pex addressed some of these issues here. I being at a college, I went to law school, so I understand a little bit of this. I'm one of the co-authors of 114. You can't be at a college without talking about math. And so I'm going to address the math issue right from the beginning, because this has been one thing that kind of gets floated around. Is it going to cost the taxpayers money? Okay. So listen really carefully with respect to this. You won't be tested at the end, but listen really carefully because this is your response. There are 2 types of costs that occur: governmental, non-governmental. Address the governmental first. If we have police, ambulance, things of that nature, investigation, that sort of thing. There's a 5-person panel within the state of Oregon addressed with the state secretary of state, treasurer, director of administrative services, director of Department of Revenue, and a city county district representative. They bring all of the materials they can possibly get to assess the governmental impact, whether or not there's going to be a cost deficit or a savings. They set out their certification August 22nd. That when you both added the cost and the added savings, the financial impact is indeterminate. They can't determine one direction or the other. So let's set that aside and let's now open your books to sub B. And that is the non-governmental cost, okay? And you want to look at this as if the permit licensing process as it comes in, it saves lives and it saves a great deal. You take Connecticut, they did the same thing. Their impact with respect to firearm violence, homicides, that went down 28%. Suicides, firearm injuries down to 33%. So these are all savings that occur. The calculators that occur as to what the cost, the cost within your community are your lost wages, your medical costs, the labor, you lose an employee, you've got to retrain, things of that nature. Those costs are anywhere from the hundreds of millions of dollars to the calculators say billions of dollars to Oregon. Now, just simply apply then the 33% to that, because that is what's being reduced. So there is a massive amount of savings by supporting 114. The next thing major is I want to talk about this, is that discrimination. Violence discriminates. And like Mr. Peck was talking about, you got blacks, you take the white community, blacks are affected 8 times more. Hispanic people, 77% more. Native Americans, 2 times more. That kind of discrimination should not be allowed to occur. When you get something like Connecticut, other places where they've had licensing laws, this slows down the process, lessens suicides. It also causes people, especially in this situation, where then the permit holder makes a determination whether or not that person is a reasonable risk to himself or others. So you deal with suicides and also violence. Anymore, we see these people just put on social media what they intend to do. It's so wrong. And so we should appreciate that we can do much better. And while this may not solve it 100%, it will do much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the waiting room online wanting to speak? Okay, our next speaker then is Adrian Mitchell.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education and President Bulger. I'm providing this public comment as a member of the campus community and not in my capacity as LCCEA president. Since most of you know me through my participation in board meetings, I'll share a little background that helps frame my comments. I've been a faculty member at LCC for more than 22 years, and I chose to come here because I'm so deeply committed to our college mission and to serving our students. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to serve in various roles on campus over the years. These include coordinating a program and managing a budget for more than 8 years and serving on the Budget Development Committee for 10 years. In addition, through these and other roles, I've had the opportunity to work closely with and learn from many administrators on budget and finance issues. I mention this to provide some small context for my comments. My interest and long-term engagement in budget issues stems from my commitment to the mission and the critical need to address systemic challenges, which frequently requires creative thinking and new paradigms. I've sent you a list of budgetary recommendations addressing both expenses and revenues, as well as new strategies and paradigms that may be helpful to consider. It does also include an appendix more narrowly focused on faculty contributions to fiscal sustainability. I would like to highlight one of our most pressing concerns related to expenses and suggest some options for addressing the Titan Court apartment building. LCC owes approximately $13.4 million on Titan Court, and the debt is scheduled to be paid through the year 2036. With interest, this amounts to $17.4 million in debt payments. More than $550,000 of this debt is paid from the general fund each year, diverting precious resources from the college mission because Titan Court operates at a loss because it cannot cover both its own expenses and the principal and interest payments. I've provided some references to the pages where you can find more detail in the budget document in the file that I sent. The most recent appraisal for Titan Court from 3 years ago valued the property at approximately $14 million. Options to consider going forward include discontinuing payment of the debt from the general fund, obtaining a current market analysis, completing a cost-benefit analysis of ongoing ownership of the property, evaluating the relationship between the apartment building and the college mission, utilizing an equity lens, evaluating the potential and the real opportunity to provide housing for low-income students if the debt is paid off through one-time funds, such as the sale of other vast real estate holdings that LCC has. You can find a link to those also posted in board docs, or other one-time funds such as legislative investment. This would also help align the use of the apartment building with the federal tax credits that we received when building Titan Court for investment in low-income communities. I won't have time to address all of the recommendations, but I do wish to suggest that you review, if you have time, the recommendations on increasing transparency and accountability, considering the option of an operating levy, applying an equity lens to differential tuition reconfiguration and a banded tuition model, conducting a staffing analysis that addresses all employees and all funds, and reframing of decision-making and the ending fund balance policy with consideration of the impacts of the current policy, which is limited to one single fund, which drives tuition increases and expense reductions simultaneously, among others. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, or even before, is there anything on the consent agenda that a member of the board would prefer to pull off the agenda? Nope. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
That was Mr. Eister
I'll second.
by Mr. Mittal. I always say Mittal.
It's good enough.
Will you please call the roll?
Holly Johnson,
Aye.
Angela Van Kraus. Aye. Mike Ister,
Aye.
Steve Mattel,
Aye.
Rosie Pryor,
Aye.
Lisa Fragile.
Aye.
The motion carries with the exception that Mr. Fulnegi is not present to vote. We'll move on to action items. The first one being the board calendar. I put at your places an updated, cleaned up version of the proposed board calendar. The only thing to further call your attention to is that when last we spoke, I forecast that I would like to change the date of the April board meeting from April. This is on the reverse side of the handout, from April 5 to April 6. The other changes would take place in January. And so I'm asking for a board motion to approve this revised board calendar. So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Holly. Lisa, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, just very briefly, Rosie, I appreciate your work on this. And I also appreciate the board's flexibility in recognizing some of the Jewish holidays in this calendar. I think it may be the first time we've done that, and I think it's a great precedent.
Any other board comments or questions about the calendar? I think Lisa, we need to extend some appreciation to you for getting us started down this road. So thank you for that.
Happy blast
it-
years.
Does a good job of helping us do some long-term personal, professional planning. I think we'll vote. Will you call the roll?
Holly Johnson,
Aye.
Angela Van Kraus,
Aye.
Mike Ister,
Aye.
Steve Mattel.
Aye.
Rosie Pryor
Aye.
and Lisa Fragile.
Aye.
We are moving on to consideration of a resolution in support of ballot measure 114. The proposed resolution is contained in your board materials. This came to our attention last month at the board's concurrence. I drafted, actually with some very much appreciated help from the experts in the community, a resolution for your consideration. So at this point, perhaps we could start the conversation by asking for a motion to approve.
I move approval.
Second.
That was Mike, followed by Angela. Mike, would you like to speak to the motion?
I think it's a well-written resolution. I appreciated the information in there and I support it.
Any other board comments or questions? Looks like we're ready to vote. Will you call the roll?
Holly Johnson,
Thank you.
Aye.
Angela Van Cross.
Aye.
Mike Ister,
Aye.
Steve Mattel.
Aye.
Rosie Pryor
Aye.
and Lisa Fragile.
Aye.
It's unanimous with the exception that Mr. Folnegi is not present and able to vote. So, yeah, very, very happy to lend our support to ballot measure 114. Okay, we're going to just keep moving right along to discussion items. The first is I will refer to President Bolger, an understanding of enrollment metrics.
Yes, be happy to have a presentation and discussion with the board about enrollment metrics that Lane Community College is going to be using. This is just the beginning of the conversation, I think, with the board on this matter. We've got Dr. Patrick Blaine to make that presentation. Patrick?
Thank you and good evening, Chair Pryor, members of the board. Wait for my slides to be up. Thank you. So my name is Patrick Blaine and I'm Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs and Institutional Effectiveness. And in July, I took over a number of the duties that Dr. Richard Plott was doing in those areas. The brief presentation today is aimed to help you understand a little bit better the enrollment data that you see each month. And we've made some small changes to those reports from last month to this month. We expect to see some more and would appreciate any feedback that you have. Switch the slide, please. To get started, we have three main metrics that we use to measure enrollment at LCC, and those are enrollment, headcount, and FTE. They all have different purposes, tell us different things. So enrollment is the most basic measure, and it is the total number of credits for which students are enrolled at any given time. And one of its functions is that it can help us calculate tuition revenue, either in an ongoing term or historically. Headcount is a little bit different. And so headcount tells us how many unique students are registered at a given point in time. And the purpose of that is for us to understand how many students we have and also look at how many average credits they're taking. So we can tell a little bit about student behavior there, as well as to measure a bit our capacity and think about that on an institutional level. The third one then is FTE. And so FTE is credits converted to full-time students. When you see that number FTE, that's what that is. The two main purposes of FTE are to calculate state funding. So our state funding is based on that calculation and reporting of FTE. And it can also be used to determine or weigh the relative size of a college or a program. Next slide, please. So a few of the different places where enrollment data is used include really basic ones that are timely for us, like course offering decisions. We can use our past enrollment levels and present enrollment levels to determine or try to determine which configuration of courses or modalities, locations, times might be successful, as well as to look at that in the past. Student Affairs uses enrollment data consistently to help serve our students. Program Review uses data. And we have a lot of other places where it's used, such as mission fulfillment indicators, dashboards, and part of the strategic plan and responding to that uses or utilizes enrollment data, as well as strategic enrollment management. And then finally, we have a lot of external reporting that goes on constantly. So we have to report to state entities, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, federal, mainly the Department of Ed, but others as well. And then the accreditor, the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities. Slide, please. But if there's one thing that I would like for you to take away from this presentation today, and it's this slide, which is very simple, and there are 3 questions on it for you. So if you can answer these 3 questions about any enrollment data, you should be able to understand what it's telling you. First question is, what is the measuring question? So is that headcount, FTE, enrollment, retention, for example? What is the population? Is it the whole population? Is it just College Now students? Is it a segment of the population? So what population is the data telling you about? And then what's the time frame? Is it a single quarter? Is it the whole year? Is it an interval of time? If you can answer those 3 questions, then most data you see should be fairly clear. Next slide, please. So 3 examples from the 3 main categories of enrollment data that I gave you. The first one here is our most commonly used graph at the college. And this graph shows fall credit enrollment. It was the graph as of day 1 last week of the fall 22 term. And you can see the 3 lines on it. There's a blue, a red, and a green line. The green line represents fall 22 enrollment. You can see the curve throughout the cycle, how our enrollment in fall 22 was matching or diverging from the curve. And so you can really see how that shaped up and see that our enrollment, at least in terms of the curve, really followed the pattern. And those historical comparisons allow us to draw some conclusions and have a bit of predictability, although in recent years that's been a little more difficult. So next slide, please. This is for headcount. So you can see different types of offerings represented here. Along the top, you see regular credit, College Now, which is our high school offerings, non-credit or continuing education, and non-credit skill development, and how they progress over the last 12 years. So the left side of the graph starts in 2010-11, and the right side is during the current year. Next slide, please. The final example is historical FTE, and we talk about this quite a bit because this shows us how we're doing year on year and what we're reporting to the state and then getting for funding. And so a reminder on this FTE is the conversion of credits to full-time students, and you can see the graph starting in 2018 and then decreasing into fall 22. And this is also a good example of in progress or historical data. So the fall 22 is at that point and still until the term is done in progress. That means those numbers will change. The other terms, the other fall terms are stable and will not change their historical data. Next slide, please. There's 2 other ways that I wanted to talk about how to understand or parse the data, and 2 ways that we divide them. There's a lot more, but these are the 2 main ones. And so one is aggregated enrollment. You're looking at all the data for the entire institution, and that can tell us how we're doing, or a program. It can tell us how we're doing globally. The other way is disaggregated enrollment. Next slide, please. So you see examples of both there in the graphs. The top graph is your aggregated enrollment numbers. And we can use those to really understand how the institution is doing, historically, as well as point in time. The bottom graph shows you the demographic composition of Pell recipients. So that's our stand-in for economic need or documented economic need. And you can see that that's divided by race ethnicity group. That's one of our ways of disaggregating. So it can help us understand those specific groups. How do they behave? What do they look like? It can help us understand how they're shaped, how they've changed, and it can also help us identify equity gaps if a certain demographic group is performing in a way that another isn't. Next slide, please. So finally, there are some other metrics that we use for enrollment really commonly at the college, and retention is one of them. That's normally expressed in percentages. So you very often see a fall to fall retention percentage or a fall to winter percentage. There's Pell eligibility, as I mentioned, that's our sort of stand-in or proxy for economic need. Credit and non-credit are our two main types of offerings looking globally. And then College Now helps us see how our dual credit offerings in the high schools are going. Of these four, retention is really the only true metric per se. The others help us divide the population. And just to close, I wanted to emphasize those three questions again from the slide a while back. If you look at any piece of data, such as the ones that are in the report from this month, look at the measure. What is it measuring? Look at the population. What is the population that is being measured? And look at the time period or interval. If you can answer those three questions, then it should be pretty intuitive what you're seeing. I've left time for any questions or comments, and we'll accept those.
Mike?
Can you remind us how we define full-time enrollment, full-time student?
Full-time student, if memory serves me correctly, is 12 credits at minimum. Getting a nod. There's that often comes into play with financial aid. So we want to know if they're full-time students or part-time students, but yeah, and sorry.
So on the FTE, we're counting the number of students that are taking 12 credits or more.
I believe that to be the case. I would have to ask my institutional researcher to answer with great certainty, but I believe that's the case. That's how the calculation is.
Well, for full-time equivalent, that's taking all of our student body, our full-time students and our part-time students. And so basically there's a formula. And we equating using the part-time students and equating them into full-time students. So that's why you'll see in the charts that that Patrick showed, if you can go back, but in the charts that he showed, that the full-time equivalent number is going to be always lower than the head count number, because the head count number would be counting each individual student based on each individual person, and then our enrollment number is going to be counting each individual student and the number of courses that they're taking. So that's what we call a duplicated number.
That's what it said converted. I wasn't quite sure what that meant, and you explained it. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah, it's by formula, and the formula starts with the enrollment numbers.
Steve?
Yep, thanks. I had two questions, and just so everybody knows, I sent them to Patrick with a CC to Stephanie and Rosie earlier today, just so I didn't want to catch you off guard. I want to give you a chance to offer a thoughtful response. So the first, I think, is fairly straightforward. Your predecessor, right, Dr. Plott, I remember, shared with me and I think other board members a dashboard that he was developing at the time that would allow board members and administrators to take a look at the data, disaggregated otherwise at any point in time, so we could get a feel for what was going on within the student body. And I was wondering if you could just give us an update on that initiative.
Absolutely. That was during the time that we switched into Power BI as our dashboard software. The Power BI dashboards are now completed, and that is rolled out to administrators about a month ago. We have a board of directors SharePoint site set up, and need to put some final touches on that and enter then in everyone's LCC email addresses, but we will be able to give you access to those dashboards as of November 15th. So November 15th, we'll be ready. They do provide in the filtering a number of different options. There's a lot of details, but we would be happy to walk you through that when you have access to them if you would like.
Well, thank you. I'm a data guy. I love looking at the numbers. I'm looking forward to that. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
The other question is kind of a provocative one. I don't expect you to, answer it in full right here and now. When I look at these numbers, not just the ones we just saw from 2018, but there was some other report that that was shared with us recently that goes, back decades, and we're seeing, essentially a steady decline across all three, metrics, right? That just shows something, I forget the precisely 40, 50, 60%, depending on which metric you're looking at over a 25-year history. It looks pretty bad from my perspective. And I start to fear like that we're in some kind of a death spiral, or at some point we would cross that threshold. So I'm wondering if, who could give us, or give me in any case, some sense of how accurate that kind of layman's perspective is.
Death spiral, that's a bit, that's sobering right there. And so certainly you have a reaction when you hear the words death spiral. And so I tell everyone I get up in the morning and I'm completely optimistic about the future of LCC and what it can do to serve this community. And so I can remain that. I would start by saying that the priorities that we have talked about and that the board supported are one step in the direction for changing the trajectory that we are seeing, this downward spiral that you're seeing. And so we are going to have an assessment of our enrollment system, not because it's broken, but because we want to understand it better. Understand the things that we are doing very well and understand the things that we're doing that we need to improve. I would also say, though, that we're not resting on our laurels. We're not just looking at this downward trend and allowing it to happen. And so we've already started those efforts. And for this fall term, we had an enrollment campaign. We started calling, emailing, texting, and sending mailers to students who have not been here in some time. Either they came for a term and they stopped coming to us, or they came for 2 or 3 or 4 terms and they stopped coming to us. And we believe that some of that effort has resulted in the students that you see in front of you and the students that you would see on campus when you come here. We are very committed also to making sure that the fastest growth area for us when we look at our data for this fall term, which is new students, that we maintain them, that we keep them. And so we want them to return to us. We have categories called returning students and categories called continuing students, and we want them to be able to continue with us. I would also say that we've got a number of efforts. One is some retention efforts that we're focusing on so that we are able to keep those students. And we're talking about some strategies like creating Lane Community College as a workforce hub in the county. So the iTech building is certainly one initiative in that regard. Also, the new health professions building and a number of other CTE programs. And there are a number of operational improvements that we've been engaged in and that are probably going to be coming to fruition this academic year because the investments have already been made. Individuals are being trained. Some of this training occurred and professional development occurred during the in-service. And these are going to be system improvements that are going to assist us with some of our efforts. So I would give you all of those as ways that we are putting effort into changing those slopes so that they are going into an upward direction. And I think I did report to the board that on the first day of class, we were very, very encouraged that even though our enrollment was a little bit down, that it was headed in the right direction, because 8 weeks ago, it was not. It was a worse picture 8 weeks ago. And so we really are encouraged, and we can come back. We'll be coming back to talk more to the board about what that enrollment picture is starting to look like. But the students that you see in front of you, we want to have them get what they came for. We want them to come back and complete their degrees and certificates.
Lisa.
Thank you. You explained some concepts that I always found a little more abstract and I feel are a little more concrete now, particularly how they kind of intersect with each other. I'm looking at the historical FTE page on slide 7. And first of all, it's interesting the segment of history that we're looking at because the last 3 years are during the pandemic. I guess I'm curious do we ever compare like this FTE to other colleges to see how we are faring with the rest of the state?
We absolutely do. And the TIPS document that Board Member Mattel was referring to, that was number 47. I think we're going to be seeing statewide comparisons and FTE coming in future TIPS, but yeah, right now we I think over the last, I'm remembering the time period, right? I think it's the last 10 years. We've seen a decrease in our share, our relative share of the FTE, but it's not really that big a decrease in the proportional share. I want to say it's something on the order of a 3% reduction in the share because all of the community colleges have seen similar declines in enrollment. Some will decline more or less in a given year, but the relative share, although it has decreased, it hasn't decreased to any extreme degree.
So glad you asked that question because the TIPS, and Jennifer, what does TIPS stand for again? Yes, really impressive documents. They come out periodically, I believe, and they are designed to be provocative. So when you see them, that's right. So when you see them, they should raise questions. They should catalyze conversations. And so clearly the last one did. And at the end of that TIPS, I know that the team said that they would place the enrollment and the headcount and probably the FTE into some context by comparing it with the other community colleges in Oregon.
Just to note, Board Member Folnaghi has joined us. Welcome, Austin. Glad you're there.
Thank you. My sincerest apologies to the board.
No worries, no worries. Holly or Austin, do either of you have questions or comments about the topic? Nope. Any other questions or comments from board members on the enrollment primer? I find myself constantly asking why, and I'm a little, while I'm extraordinarily appreciative of all the things that President Bolger has enumerated that the administration and faculty and staff are doing to grow and retain enrollment, I still find myself wanting to know why students who once attended Lane in significantly larger numbers are no longer. And the best you can do is speculate because we don't have good hard data. I know that with enrollment being one of the president's 3 priorities for this year, enrollment's going to get a really hard look. And what I hope will get some consideration in that deep dive is not just how we enroll students and how we work to retain students, but who's coming to Lane and who's not.
Mm-hmm.
Who used to come to Lane and who's not coming anymore. I think all my board colleagues will lament the fact when I bring it up that tuition has been a sensitive issue to me for 11 years of service on this board. I worry a lot that we have contributed to the lack of access, perhaps that may now exist that perhaps didn't exist 10, 12 years ago when tuition was lower and the cost of living was lower. in all the years that we've consistently raised tuition, and we have done so every single year I've been on the board, the cost of living has also risen exponentially. Housing, childcare, fuel. And so I worry that part-time mature student who used to be the Lane student profile 10, 11 years ago, that person is now working 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet and simply can't afford or have time to come to Lane. But again, it's just speculation because we don't know. So I really hope that when we hear more about the deep dive on enrollment after the first of the year, that if we don't yet know why, perhaps we can talk about some ways to learn why. Yes, Lisa.
I did just notice that Austin had his hand up before me, but
Thank you.
Yeah.
Austin.
I think just a statement, I guess, not a question, but I think a part of it is economical, macro and micro. Obviously, when we see unemployment low, we see enrollments low as well. When we see unemployment increase, we see enrollment increase. That's kind of been a traditional aspect of community colleges as far as those type of dynamics. As part of answering this question, I think the question that you're asking, which I think is a good one, I think we would really benefit from a presentation from Henry Fields, who's the regional economist. He could talk about different things, including what is happening in the labor force, what's happening in our economy and economic conditions. Additionally, I also see like opportunities though in this economic condition. A lot of the student populations that you're talking about, the non-traditional students, many of them could really benefit from our STEP programs that we have through our institution and a variety of other different programs that can help pay for their tuition, which would help our enrollment numbers, which would reach out to those populations that you're talking about. And and it can be beneficial for us during low unemployment time periods and high unemployment time periods. So with that, I think there is, so I hear what you're asking, Rosie, and I agree with many aspects of it. And I think, and I'll say this towards the end of our board meeting, but I think the board can really benefit from understanding the macro and microeconomic aspects of our community that could help better look at enrollments and opportunities with enrollment.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, so I did have something and then I noticed Austin's hand was up. So I appreciate that question of why, right? And so I guess the thing that I would be interested if, Dr. Bolger, you or, Patrick, if you come across things or even Grant, that you're reading about national trends or research that's happening. If you could forward that to myself or any other board members that are interested. I do think there's certainly a lot of good research that's being conducted out there. And I know ACCT is definitely one of them. So I would be interested in reading more as to understand these issues at a macro level.
Yeah, and also when you do those comparisons between Lane and other Oregon community colleges, it seems to me in the past we've been told Lane's declines in enrollment have been steeper than the other community colleges. I don't know if that's any longer the case, but I mean, I'm interested in knowing more about that as well, and I would think that would shed some light on, or at least steer us in the direction of things to look at internally about why that might be true, if it's even true. Mike, sorry.
Yeah, to Lisa's point and to Austin's point, Henry Fields is an incredible resource to the region. And I'm not sure how long it would take us to get scheduled with him, but my guess is that he would be happy to provide something in writing to us that might answer some of these questions, or at least scratch the surface. The other thing is that he's probably making presentations all the time. And there's a chance that we might be able to get a copy of a video that he's done recently with a city club or a chamber of commerce or one of the other civic organizations. And then the last comment is that my understanding, Austin, is that the relationship you described is a relationship that has existed in the past, but is running contrary to what has happened in the past. That is that as employment is picking up, we're not seeing that impact. Well, that is employment, as employment dropped off, we weren't seeing an increase in enrollment, which is what we would have expected from the past. Now, I'm not sure what's happened as employment's picked it up, is starting to pick up. It seems like we're still not seeing an increase in enrollment, which you might expect based on past relationships. But when the enrollment dropped off recently, or for the last, or when employment dropped off, that didn't cause an increase in enrollments here, or as far as I can tell, at most community colleges around the country.
Any more board questions or comments about enrollment?
Well, thank you for the questions, and we'll certainly, and the suggestions, and we'll certainly take those back and we'll follow up on those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well done. So moving on to the health professions program. I actually asked if we could have a presentation about the health professions program because I came out to campus when Senator Merkley was here and was just overwhelmed by what I learned and what I heard, and was convinced that all of my colleagues on the board would want the very same information. So
I'd love to introduce the group that's going to talk about the health professions. And we've got Dean Corey Minor, and we also have our interim Vice President of Academic Affairs, Grant Matthews. And so Grant, do you want to introduce this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Pryor. I am actually going to turn the time over to Corey for the work that he's done leading his team in these efforts. Dean Minor has been working with them for several years and does a phenomenal job. And but I'm here for questions or otherwise as needed.
Thank you, Chair Pryor, members of the board, and President Bolger. I don't have anything nearly as provocative as Patrick. And perhaps this will be one small example of maybe the anti-death spiral with health professions. As Chair Pryor mentioned, Senator Merkley was here specifically to discuss the federal community funding grant that Dr. Bolger mentioned at the beginning of this meeting. And so we had a chance to talk to him about that funding possibility, and that's where this kind of grew. So I'm here to just try to give a little bit of information about health professions. I can answer some questions when it's all said and done. There's no possible way that I can adequately in a few minutes cover the amazing accomplishments of this division, and especially what it accomplished throughout COVID. So I'll try to just hit some highlights of some of the things that are here so that you're armed with some information on what we did. So first of all, I have a couple of really important acknowledgements to make for the division. Slide, please. The faculty and staff here have been absolutely amazing. And I just want to take a moment to talk about COVID. There's some things about this particular health professions division at Lane that is unique. And that is health professions didn't pause, didn't slow down, and didn't stop during COVID. When we had colleges closing or programs that were stopping because of COVID, our health professions did not. Our faculty got together. They were incredibly collaborative, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And we didn't lose the enrollments in our programs. Our programs maintained, the healthcare industry has always been in short supply of pipeline workers. And during COVID, we all know what happened in our community, and the healthcare worker declined throughout all of our industries. So we maintained through the entire time with health professions, our programs maintained, and we did some amazing things to try to keep our programs moving forward. So the demand for health professions actually grew throughout COVID and still remains high now. Our programs found out how to maintain safe in-person instruction. In person. Yes, we moved some of our lecture stuff to online, but most of our stuff, you can't teach IVs on Zoom, and you can't teach someone how to intubate on Zoom, and you can't change beds on Zoom. So we maintained in-person instruction throughout that entire time. And we had some absolutely amazing community support. Unlike some other communities, our community partners, Peace Health, McKinsey-Willamette, the fire agencies, OMG, many others were incredibly supportive and maintained our clinical sites here in Eugene and in Lane County, where many other communities, those same types of organizations closed their doors to students. So we had an amazing community support right here. And our students were able to complete, and they were able to complete on time, which is absolutely amazing. So a couple of things, just the faculty here have been incredible. They were collaborative. They joined together as groups, not as independent silos. They worked tirelessly, and they were determined to make sure that students could keep moving. So we wrote protocols on how to keep moving. We were maybe offline for about 2 weeks while we were getting everything together. But after that, we were completely fully engaged. So we wrote protocols on how to safely manage that. And those protocols have been used at other parts of this institution. They've been used at our sister institutions where other schools saw what we were doing, used us as an example, borrowed our material and got themselves online. Those same protocols have even been used in some of the departments in Forest Service, some of the departments in OHA, all kinds of different places. So Lane was really a true example of how to get through COVID. I can't say enough about our staff. Our staff, they're short-staffed, they're overworked. They didn't complain, they worked hard, and throughout COVID, they didn't lose work time. They worked more. We had so many things that had to be accomplished that I just can't say enough. I couldn't be prouder of the work that the staff did. They were just incredible. And as we're coming out of COVID, they're getting busier as we're trying to get everything back into place. So that staff was just outstanding. So I just wanted to make sure those acknowledgements were made. So a few things. Did you know? A couple of things that I want to make sure that you're aware of. So one, health professions programs pass rates. Please understand, as I'm talking about these pass rates, I'm talking about during and as we're coming out of COVID, when students had some of the worst times in their personal lives. We had 100% pass rates on our state and national certifying and licensing exams, despite the problems with COVID in our nursing program, our LPN program, our physical therapy assistant program, our medical assistant program, dental assistant, dental hygiene, EMT, and paramedic. The students had 100% pass rates in those programs on many of these tests. You can imagine the dedication of faculty and staff that it took to help those students be successful in some of the most trying times. So 100% pass rate was incredible. The fires that hit, this is a little bit dated, but it happened during COVID, and I just wanted to make sure that you understand. The fires that hit the Upper McKinsey, that leveled Blue River, that just took out many of our community homes, some things that you should be aware of. Our EMS program actually coordinated all of the emergency medical services in the Upper McKinsey area. The devastation completely decimated the fire service up there, and they needed support. And we had our own folks go up there and lead the volunteer. They coordinated all the volunteers. We had volunteers all around the state that showed up, and it was our EMS program that coordinated all of those efforts until the Upper McKinsey Fire Department could get back into supporting their own community. We did that in partnership with Eugene Springfield Fire and their medical director, who is also our medical director, Christopher Paulson, volunteered his time to be the medical director for those events. And then we also assisted with the Autzen Stadium evacuation site for Oak Ridge at that same time. So again, a wonderful opportunity and showcasing what Lane can do. The World Athletic Championships. It was the first time it was ever held in the United States. And here it was in Eugene. And Lane made an incredible showing there and through our division. One, we had faculty that participated on the athletic medical team. So Christina Howard and Beth Thorpe were both members of the medical team for Worlds. Our EMS program, once again, provided all of the medical coverage throughout all of the days of the Worlds at Hayward Field. And our physical education and athletics program provided an amazing facility here for all of the athletes and coaches to practice. Grady O'Connor, Tara Deacon, Bill Steyer, and Taya Ream all need to be acknowledged for the incredible work that they did. We had amazing comments from coaches and athletes around the world on what an incredible experience they had using our facilities. And our division earned close to $100,000 for Lane Community College through those various events. So once again, an amazing showing for Lane and an event that took place for the first time ever in the United States, and it won't be back for a while because Worlds goes everywhere else too. So, and then just another little plug for our visibility. For those of you that look at those Duck Games or Eugene Marathon or other things, you'll notice that we have folks right here from our health professions programs who are providing medical coverage at those events as well. So we bring in close to $40,000 or so in income from U of O football games for the services that we provide there, and we provide services throughout the community. The American Red Cross used to have a program called the First Aid Service Team, and it was a high school. It was a first aid service team made of high school students, and the Red Cross dropped that program through their restructuring process. We acquired all of the equipment from that, and we are starting to put together a very similar program. And we've been communicating and working with Lane ESD and Lane CTE on ways all of the high school students who go through the CTE programs in the local high schools are now mandated to do a certain amount of volunteer time. And so we're starting to build and structure a program that will actually allow those students to partner with our EMS students and our other faculty who can help to give them these opportunities to volunteer at events just like this. So. And then a couple things about the recent grant funding, which spurred why I'm here. As Chair Pryor mentioned, we were visiting with Senator Merkley on one of these grants, and so I wanted to just let you know some of the things that were happening here. So, first of all, we had a grant that Representative Wildey provided for us. Understand that these grants came by very quickly, in about less than 72 hours, give or take, we got notice that Representative Wildey had an opportunity for some funding for some ambulances. So we wrote a grant, we got quotes, and we worked with ambulance building partners, and they were gracious at getting us information in a very short amount of time. And so we wrote a grant, we submitted the grant to Representative Wildey, and we got it. So we have $500,000 that went towards the purchase of 2 brand new state-of-the-art ambulances. Those ambulances are already under construction. So we've already received the funds, and we've already moved forward to having those constructed. It takes about a year to build an ambulance. So right about the time the new building will be getting ready, give or take, we'll also have some ambulances that will be able to be used. The ambulances that we have here are beyond needing to be out to pasture. They're unsafe, and we actually can't legitimately teach the things that we need to teach for those students in those rigs because they're mechanically not sound. So we have other uses for those. But for now, we have about a year to wait for the new ambulances from the generosity of Representative Wildey. The federal community funding project that was mentioned earlier, it's another $500,000 grant that is coming through our federal funding. We don't have it yet because, yeah. $0.4. Yes, so yes, so senators don't give any more time than representatives. It was maybe 26 hours, so we didn't have very much time to write this grant either. So I was gracious in saying 48, but yes, within about a day, we put together an initial budget and wrote a grant for a simulation lab. The simulation lab has been on the docket for us for a long time. We've been trying all kinds of different ways to find the funding to do this. Simulation is an amazing way of teaching in health professions, and things changed in COVID. In COVID, we had many teaching mandates for health professions where we had to do clinical, real patient contact. And what they found during COVID was that they looked much more closely because of the problem that I mentioned before, where some of the clinical sites were closing their doors to students throughout the country. They looked at that and said, well, what really has to happen on a live patient versus what can we do in simulation? And a lot of our accrediting bodies found different ways to approach teaching, and found that simulation could be used in many of the ways that it's always been used, but they found that it could be used even more robustly in many of the ways that were being used traditionally on live patients. And as we're coming out of COVID, those accrediting bodies are not changing. They're maintaining what they gave as temporary. We'll manage this during COVID, but then we'll go back. But as we're coming out of COVID, they're not going back. They found out that these are wonderful teaching possibilities and ways that we can accomplish work that is still training people to the same level as other models. And so we are looking at a simulation lab. This was one of the things that was discussed in our bond measure. This has been taken out of the bond, so the bond can go further in other ways. We talked about it with Perkins funding. We've taken it out of Perkins, so Perkins can go further in other ways, and we put it here. And so Senator Merkley's chief of staff visited here, and we took him on a tour, and he talked to us for a while, and he was impressed with what he saw. He took that back to Senator Merkley, and a couple of weeks later, Senator Merkley decided to pay us a visit. He was here for about an hour and 20 minutes. So he spent actually a pretty decent amount of time with us. And we talked about all of the different things that health professions did. He went on a tour of the simulation lab and where it's going to be housed. And was once again very impressed with all the different things that we did, and was very supportive of our project. So we are waiting for the legislative budgeting process to go through. And if it goes through in our favor, then that $500,000 towards a staffed simulation lab will also be here at Lane. In addition to that, I didn't put that on the slide, but the state of Oregon has been talking to us for some time about putting together a certificate pathway related to teacher training on simulation that they would like to house here at Lane. So we'd be creating either a degree or a certificate pathway where people can be trained on how to use simulation in educational settings and then go to other institutions to create simulation possibilities in their institutions. So again, wonderful opportunities from our health profession. And then we have a Healthy Oregon Workforce Training Opportunity Grant, a how-to grant that we were awarded. There were about 20 different organizations within our community that went together on this. Medical assisting is one of the biggest areas of growth across the country and one of the biggest needs. We have over 250 open medical assisting positions right here in this community, and we can't meet the need. And so we just simply can't train people fast enough. Those organizations just can't get enough workers. And so we're part of the How-To Grant. And as we partnered with these organizations, our portion of that is that we have 12 $5,000 scholarships for medical assisting students, specifically students that have been marginalized or incumbent workers, to get them into the possibility of moving up in their organization. So it supports 12 $5,000 scholarships a year for the next 3 years. And it also gives us the funding to be able to have an evening cohort for medical assisting. And then it allows us to start a peer support specialist training program and provide some scholarships for individuals to enter that training. And then we're partnering with Centro Latino Americano and some others to do a community health worker training as well. So another wonderful grant that is allowing us to do more for our community. So that's what I have. Maybe the anti-spiral. And what questions you have?
Mike?
So I was wondering about the connection between the facility in Cottage Grove and the program.
Yeah, excellent question. So we are working with Lane County on the what's being constructed down in South Lane. We will have an interaction with them, and we will have some of Lane's programs down there. We're still working out the details on exactly what that might look like. We've looked at things like dental hygiene. We've looked at EMS. We've looked at some other programs that CNA and some other programs that we can do down there. And we are in those discussions regularly with Lane County on how we can best utilize that space.
Thanks.
They've been fantastic to work with.
Any other board member questions or comments? Lisa?
Yeah, as a follow-up to Mike's, I'd be curious to hear about what we're doing in Florence and how we might expand upon that.
Yeah, excellent question. So we have done several EMS related classes over there, EMT classes that Siuslaw Fire and Lane and Western Lane Ambulance have put together. We also started this past year our first CNA program at Siuslaw High School that was in partnership with Peace Harbor. We got everything kind of put together last year and did do a pilot cohort. It worked great, and we are expanding that to make sure that we are providing CNA training in that area. So those are the two biggest areas within health professions that are fitting within that community.
Right, thank you.
Yes.
Just some real-time feedback. Marty appreciates the kudos, and he says he'll be at the groundbreaking next week.
Marty.
Any other questions, board members? Austin?
First off, Chair, thank you for bringing this, asking for this presentation to the board. I really appreciate that. Two questions. One, the 12 scholarships, is that tuition and living expenses or just tuition? And second, is the how-to, does the funding derive from that, for that program derive from the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, or is there a different source of funding for the how-to program?
So thanks, Austin. The how-to grant, so the scholarships are general scholarships for those students. So it would go apply first towards tuition fees and other expenses, but it is designed to just support the students while they are in that program. So it wouldn't be restrictive in that sense. It was designed as direct student aid and in that aspect. And as far as the funding source, how-to is funded through OHA. And it is not a WIOA, to my understanding, a WIOA funded program. I'm not sure to the extent to which federal funds, it's a pass-through for federal funds, but I know that generally it's state OHA dollars.
Understood. Thank you.
Is it correct to think that one of the biggest enrollment constraints on our health occupations, health professions programs are the imposition of faculty student ratios and the cost of equipment? And I mean, what keeps us from expanding a lot more quickly than perhaps we're expanding?
Yeah, so the state of Oregon does not fund CTE programs differently than other programs, and CTE programs are far more expensive. They're equipment heavy. The student instructor ratio is very small, and so the funding is just really not there. That's one aspect. The other aspect is most of our health professions programs require clinical experiences and partnerships with clinical sites, and they simply don't have the room. They only have so much space to have folks there. So we're frankly maxed out at the number of students we can send to our partners. It's very difficult to send them out of the area. We do send some of our EMS students out of state. Some go as far as Hawaii, Idaho, to different internship sites. But for nursing and that kind of thing, it's very difficult to send them out of the area because those areas are also inundated with schools, and it's hard to do that. So we have to balance very carefully how much we are pushing on our clinical partners. Something that may be able to change in the future as we do more with simulation, right? But at the same time, those are the constraints right now.
And if I could add, yes, in addition to those two, student teacher ratios are a concern that does impact the total cost factor. That does constrain, the amount that we invest in these programs. But just to kind of add on to Corey's comments, as you saw from some of his earlier presentation, the community partners that we have in the health areas have done a phenomenal job of really stretching their ability to take on clinical students throughout this community. It's really impressive when you look at other communities and the amount of openness they have to students within their facilities. Many of our facilities have really tried to maximize the number of students that they have within their institutions and really encouraged their staff members to be preceptors and to take on students. It's just an extremely collaborative environment that we're in with many of our partners here who understand the importance of taking on students.
And we also appreciate the question because we all know that the supply is lower than the demand. There's a huge demand for healthcare workers in the state, and we are just not. We would love to be able to do more, but we're just not able to do more for the reasons that are stated. Yeah.
Well, I thank you for this presentation. Oh, Lisa, somebody online?
Holly had her hand up.
Oh, Holly.
Thank you. I took it down because President Bolger might have just answered my question. I was just wondering, and thank you for such a thorough report. That was awesome and refreshing. Are we working in collaboration with any of our local high schools? I know Sayusla has that wonderful program with their CNA program, but are we working with any of our local high schools to bring or to get some of our local students encouraged in the health professions, such as bringing programs into the high schools where they can get some training or some type of encouragement to attend LCC for the health professions? I know Springfield High School at one time had something towards the health professions, but Dr. Bolger may have just answered. I know demand is high for the profession, but I don't know if we have the staff in those high schools to hold such programs such as that to get the students involved a little bit earlier, before they get to ALCC.
Yeah, I'm really happy you asked that question. Yes, we work very closely with Lane ESD. We've got a fairly robust College Now set of programs that based on health professions. We do have a CNA program that is in Springfield High School right now, and it is going. It's doing fantastically. And we've worked really closely with these high schools to try to build this up. In fact, we have two projects. One we completed already, and one that we're in the process of doing. That the last year we completed a project where we took all of our for our HP 150 and 152, which is our human body systems programs, and we completely reconstructed a open resource that can be used in the high schools to try to make things easier for all instructors, high school and our folks to be on the same page and open up the resources that are being used there. And we're in the process of doing the same thing with our medical terminology. And as I mentioned before, we're working with Lane ESD and Lane CTE on several projects that we're trying to build. This first aid service team as an example. We finished a med splash over the summer, and that's becoming larger, and that's also found in this how-to grant as well, to fund more of the med splash opportunities for middle school and high school students. So yeah, we are trying to increase the collaborative nature that we have with our high school partners.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I apologize for interrupting you, Holly. I wanted to say to both of you and to Dr. Bolger, watching this team in action when Senator Merkley was here was just the most overwhelmingly impressive experience in recent memory. I mean, they were on fire that afternoon, and we have to thank Dr. Paulson as well, because he contributed to being a community member and a clinician who was so praiseworthy and creative in his explanation of how our programs go far beyond the immediate training of students to interactions with other providers in other parts of the district and even beyond perhaps. So I was so impressed, and I knew you all would really want to hear about this program as well. One of the things that Steve and I have discussed with Dr. Bulger is bringing more of this forward in board meetings going forward, so that at least once a month we can hear more about some of the different programs that are afoot in the college. So thank you so much for making the time to
Thank
share
you.
with us
I
tonight.
appreciate your time.
Really appreciate it. We are moving on to reports, and in the first one, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bulger, and you can start us off.
We want to have the students come forward, and Carl, with you, our dean, and Ramon, or Carl is going to do that. Please come on up and let us recognize you as well. And could you introduce yourselves and just talk about, your titles here at Lane Community College, and then introduce the students?
Of course. Thank you, Dr. Bulger. Members of the board, my name is Carl Yeh. I'm the Dean of Student Engagement. I actually already introduced a little bit already, so I'm going to let Ramon Concepcion do the introductions for the students.
Thank you very much. My name is Ramon Concepcion. I'm the, should I still call myself new? Director for Student Life and Literature. So I have the pleasure to work with Carl Yeh and Don Wenning. So I want to introduce our elected student government officials. We have, if they want to step up to the podium, if that's okay, for them to introduce themselves on the board. Members on the team.
Hello, my name is Amaya Kirkaburu. I am the Vice President of the Lane Student Government Association. I am honored to be here. I'm excited to be here. And I'm looking forward to doing a lot of good work with our student population and hopefully with President Bulger and the board in the future. So thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Hina Tamura, and I am a senator at Student Government. I am an international student from Japan, and I came here end of last year. So this is my fourth term studying at Lane, and it's been fantastic experience for me to try new things, and including the student government too. And I'm so excited to be a part of this community and contribute more about my perspective and for all of the students. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Board of Education and President Bulger. My name is Nicole Romlikin, and I'm an international student from South Africa, majoring in computer science here at Lane, and I'm honored to serve as the president of the Student Government Association of Lane Community College. My goal is to be an accurate and a good voice for our entire student body. On behalf of the SGA, we have prepared an initial report based on our activities since the 26th of September 2022. We are currently working on recruiting 3 new senators to the SGA. We collected contact information from students interested in joining the Lane SGA during the annual Welcome Week. Last week, we conducted a phone bank to contact them and discuss their interest. We are currently in the process of sending out a mass email to the entire student body detailing the requirements of the senator position along with the petition process. We will complete the recruitment process by the end of October 2022. We are also in the process of transitioning from Titan Community software to new alternatives as a medium for our student engagement platform. Our contract with Anthology recently expired, which has allowed us to explore alternative student engagement platforms. This allows us to reimagine how the newsletter is delivered, how our clubs connect with one another, and how we connect with the student body in general. It is critical for us to implement this transition as soon as possible so that we can notify students of essential resources such as the Rainy Day Food Pantry and the Clothing Stash. Currently, we are learning how to use our current platforms such as Moodle, MyLane, and the Google Suite as our transitioning alternative, which we hope will fill the role that Titan Communities previously occupied. We will also be examining a new potential engagement software and reaching out to the student population to assess their needs regarding engagement platforms. The need for effective student reach platforms is critical based on the data that was provided to us by the Community Advocacy and Resource Education, CARE. We have noticed a high need for food pantry services on campus to remain available. Our SGA team will be collaborating with CARE to promote the food pantry, the clothing stash, and other essential services that are provided to help all Lane students. I appreciate the time and efforts that the board has put into supporting us as the student government, as well as our entire student body. We look forward to strengthening our relationship with the board and LCC leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Very impressive. Do board members have questions or comments for our student leadership? Yes.
Well, I don't have a question right now. It seems like you've been in your tenure just for a few short weeks, but I'm looking forward to you coming back frequently. I hope this academic year, giving us reports and perspective and an opportunity to engage with you. So welcome and thank you so much for an incredibly articulate introduction.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you. That takes us to a report from LCCEF. And is that Frankie online?
No, this is Fiora, Star Child Wolf. Frankie's not able to be with us this evening. Yeah. So good evening to our esteemed board and to President Bolger. I'm speaking on behalf of LCCEF President Frankie Kokenauer. I'm Fiora Starchild Wolf, COPE Officer of LCCEF, and my pronouns are she, her. These comments were previously written by Frankie, though somewhat edited. We are nearing the end of the second week of fall term 2022, and all around Lane classified professionals are helping students, both in person and online, with last-minute schedule changes, getting them into classes, making sure they are able to access their resources, processing financial aid, paying student accounts, as well as sending living expenses back to them to help them stay in school, caring for the grounds, making sure the campus looks beautiful, keeping IT systems running, both in the foreground for students and faculty in their classes, and in the many ways we all keep things running and organized behind the scene, securing and keeping our campus safe, answering questions, guiding to next steps, and helping with any challenges, and doing more than I can even begin to mention here. We love our work and the students, and every one of us is dedicated to making Lane Community College the best it can be. However, even though things appear to be running smoothly, it feels more and more as if classified professionals aren't taken seriously as the highly important part of success of students and the college overall that we are. Right now, there are departments on this campus where there is only one classified professional working. In departments where this is the case, there is not only an overload for that one person doing the task, but a sense that it is not okay to take needed and earned time away. We understand that the college faces financial struggles, but hope the value and need for classified professionals will be more highly recognized rather than being asked only to bear the burdens. The college is trying to hire, but classified wages at Lane are below the wages that are being paid elsewhere, both private and public. This not only makes it harder to hire new people, but we're also seeing experienced workers finding employment elsewhere at substantially higher wages. We lost several employees this summer, not only because of wages, but because they could also find more flexibility in the way they approach their jobs, such as options to work remotely or more input into the systems they use. This loss of experienced workers leaves a burden on those who are still here. Our numbers shrink while the workload increases. During our in-service, during the in-service 2 weeks ago, LCCEF held a general membership meeting, and our president, Frankie Kokenauer, was told by some of our long-term and most experienced members that they're trying to decide if the benefits at the college are worth the amount of pay that we receive when compared with increased workloads they are taking on to positions not being backfilled. We wonder what the college might be willing to do to help classified professionals feel more valued, and as many take on the added responsibilities of their coworkers who have left. Though we are hearing from some employees who are hitting their breaking point, these past few weeks we are still seeing each one giving the best we've got for students as we help them into and through this new academic year. Classified professionals often find ourselves going the extra mile for our students and our colleagues. We ask the cabinet and the board to work with us to find creative solutions as we head into what we hope will be a successful and enriching year, not only for our students, but all who work to make Lane Community College successful. Thank you.
Thank you. And now a report from LCCEA. Adrian?
Good evening. I'm going to talk about a few brief topics. One is related to shared governance systems, some labor relations and other faculty updates, and my favorite part, the faculty highlights. First, just wanted to share a little bit about LCC's shared governance system and how it differs from shared governance systems in other locations such as California. So for example, in California, shared governance is legislated. So this means that the roles are very clearly defined for groups such as faculty and classified professionals who are participating in the shared governance system. And those roles include what types of decisions are made by whom and how. Policies pass up through internal shared governance systems in California to the level of the board. So the policies that go through shared governance would actually, if we were in California, be coming to all of you here. Here in Oregon, we have quite different system for shared governance, not only at LCC, but at many institutions throughout the state. Shared governance is defined at the institutional level, and policies that are passed through shared governance do not move forward to the Board of Ed. They're typically policies that would be considered administrative rules elsewhere. With the exception of the strategic plan or the annual budget development process, those policies remain kind of part of the college's policies and procedures, but don't rise to the level of board policies. And of course, I'm sure you are very much aware that you write your own policies and that your policies are also informed by the OCCA model policies. So just some differences that we have related to how our shared governance operates at LCC. I wanted to share a few labor relations updates. One pressing issue that's impacting faculty and students is that instructional testing services has not been reopened. ITS provides proctored testing in a lab setting for online courses, as well as simulated exams and proctored exams for courses for which students will need to be taking licensure exams, like many of the health professions programs that you've heard about. This impacts faculty and students in 180 courses that are typically served by the testing center. We're very much looking forward to collaborating to ensure that the critical needs of students are met by the reopening of the ITS. I think this is one of the an example of one of the areas that is also impacting LCCEF with the lack of new hires that could be serving in that role. LCCEA filed an unfair labor practice complaint last week related to the college's unlawful implementation of a unilateral change in working conditions. This resulted from the only partial implementation of a binding arbitration award about uncompensated instructional time for dental hygiene faculty. This action has impacted not only faculty, but also students, dental program accreditation, dental clinic billing and revenue, dental clinic contracts with community partners, and needy patients who have no other access to dental care in the community, 20 of whom were already displaced from appointments that had been scheduled just for the first day of clinicals. We hope that there will be a productive and collaborative resolution possible soon. Yesterday, LCCEA received formal notice about a partial layoff and likely employee transfer affecting the French program in January. We look forward to working together collaboratively to ensure that any affected faculty members are transferred to other positions for which they're qualified. Now for the most favorite part, the faculty highlights. We're so very excited to welcome many new faculty members this year, including 7 new faculty participants in our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Faculty Fellowship Program. There was a kickoff in September that was part of the Faculty Connections Program, and we had 2 really amazing guest speakers who talked about building a sense of belonging at work, Dr. Carla Gray and Dr. Cassandra Manuelito Kirkliet. We're also welcoming 3 new LCCEA officers, Vice President for Transfer Faculty, Kate Sullivan, Vice President for Part-Time Faculty, Peggy Oberstaller, and Vice President at Large, Rosa Lopez. In addition, I'd like to recognize the continuing officers for their ongoing service and dedication to faculty. Vice President for Career Technical Faculty, Christina Howard, Vice President for Learning Advancement, Wendy Simmons, and Secretary Erin Bartley and Treasurer Marge Helzer. And last, I would like to share that one of our longtime part-time faculty members, Beth Adelot, in writing, was featured on the OEA Grow podcast for educators. And in the board report, which is, or in the my report, which is posted on Board Docs, there is a link to her podcast so you can listen and hear about how she engages with students. And I found it really warm and wonderful to listen to. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Board members, you have a number of information reports in your packet. Are there questions, observations about any of those reports tonight? Lisa.
Yeah. Okay, so I think, there we go. So I was looking over the HR dashboard and I found the information to be really useful. Love the visuals. And on page 3, there's employee demographics. And I just was curious because on the previous slide, it shows it over the employee counts over time. Could we potentially get something similar around demographics in the future?
I believe we could do that. I'll check with Brandon and see what we can do for you.
Okay, great. Because I am interested in knowing how some of the conversations we've had around goals of increasing the diversity of faculty and staff are progressing, and just curious to see what those trends look like. Thank you.
Yes, Angela.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say thank you for the bond facilities report. I found it very informative. I appreciated the summary and all of the having a better understanding of just a quick sort of executive summary of the full cost of the project versus the construction costs of the projects. I feel like it really helped give me a big picture view of what's happening, and I really appreciated it.
Any other board questions, observations? Okay, there being none, we will move on to future meeting dates and agenda items. We've passed unanimously, Austin, in your absence, I apologize, the board calendar, the revised board calendar. And we'll make sure we get that loaded into Board Docs ASAP so that you have it there for your reference. Any other questions or observations about future meeting dates? That brings us to an item on our agenda, which we discussed ensuring when we were at our retreat a couple weeks ago, whenever that was, a week ago, I don't remember. Time flies when you're having this much fun. Having an item on the agenda so that there is an opportunity for individual board members to raise questions or make observations about topics that you're interested in seeing on future board agendas. So this is the time to do that, in addition to any other report any board member might care to make. So is there anyone, Austin?
Just wanted to report on regards to OCCEA.
Thank you.
Excellent. So yeah, Dr. Bulger and I, we attended the, oh, 1 second here. I'm pulling up the info. The all board training on Saturday, September 17th. We discussed a variety of different topics amongst all the community college boards and presidents, including things like aid and access for students, Board of Education training, student success efforts, Future Ready Oregon, Transfer Council, and student basic needs support systems. We obviously are going into this legislative session with different priorities and kind of a greater understanding of the political landscape that we are in as a state. And of course, the legislative session will determine a lot about community college funding and so forth. I think there's a great opportunity for us to talk to our legislators on the 13th when we do the groundbreaking. So I want to encourage conversations with our legislators on those different topics. Tomorrow is the executive board meeting. There's going to be a variety of different topics that are going to be discussed. One of the topics that I know that the board that I've already mentioned to the executive director, but I'm going to mention it in the board meeting, is the joint board, the board survey. So that and how we can do a board survey brought to us by OCCA, and for shared data so that we can have an understanding of the concerns and dynamics of other community colleges without necessarily expressing without necessarily expressing which community college it is and so forth. Just kind of have an overview of what board of trustees are experiencing in their reviews and their surveys. So I'm going to be bringing that up in tomorrow's executive board meeting as well. So, and I am going to be participating in the legislative committee with OCCA. So I will be keeping the board up to date of legislative priorities, legislative items to keep an eye out for, and I look forward to being a part of that role.
Great, thank you. Thank you for representing us there. Yes, Lisa.
So in my role as a liaison from the board to the LCC Foundation, I'm looking forward to my first full foundation board meeting next Wednesday, October 12th. So I'm excited to get to participate in that. And then I'm looking forward to seeing everybody at the LCC Foundation celebration on Thursday, the 13th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Graduate Hotel. Should be fun.
Looking forward to it. Any other board member reports, board member comments? Yes, Steve.
It's not a report, it's just a question, a process question. So at the outset of the meeting today, we in the consent calendar, we had whatever it was 10 or 12 new staff and faculty who had been hired by the institution. And my understanding is that I guess this is a question as much as anything else, is that we have sort of a last, opportunity to hire or not. And I guess I'm just wondering why we do that. I don't really feel like there's much of a role for the board to weigh in on that. I also worry that we are delaying the arrival of faculty and staff who have to wait for, this final approval. It might delay their start date by as much as a month. And I'm wondering if we don't have to answer the question right now, perhaps could look into it for the future. If there's some reason that I'm not aware of that makes sense for the board to weigh in on that, I'd be happy to hear that. Otherwise, sometime down the road this year, I might make a motion that we eliminate that process and trust our leadership to handle it.
Yes, it's certainly a process that I inherited. And so I don't know if anyone wants to talk about that. If not, then we will respond to your question. But I think it's frankly a practice that I inherited and assume that the board was interested in having that information.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
would encourage us to look at our board policies. I've been rereading our own board policies recently, and I think there is a call for this in one of our board policies.
Which can be changed.
I mean,
It's
for me,
strictly an information. item.
well, that's the question. If it's strictly informational, then that's fine. Of course, then it doesn't belong in a consent agenda. The way it's presented, it sounds as if we're actually making a decision. So that's some of the issues that
Maybe we can research that. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll look into that. Thank you.
Anything else from the board? I am going to adjourn this meeting.
Got Austin.
Oh, Austin, forgive me. I didn't look down.
Not a problem. It's been a matter of board discussions and presentations.
Yes.
Obviously, I mentioned Henry Fields, obviously, in our discussion. Additionally, it's been a while since we as the board heard from the STEPS program. And I would love for us to get some additional information in regards to the STEP program and the good work that our staff is doing in supporting students. I would also like to see if we can get information and a presentation from our benefits navigator. For those who might be familiar, the benefits navigator is a position that was created by the legislative session and bill to essentially allow for students to be able to navigate the different benefit programs that can help them with paying for school, putting a roof over their head, and make sure they have food in their refrigerator and so forth. So it was amongst many other different things. But yeah, I think it would be really beneficial to the board as we continue to talk about enrollments, as we continue to talk about any barriers to education or resources to get students into education. I think it would be really beneficial for the board to be aware of the work that's being done in those areas. That could be in a presentation, a report, but I think it'd be most beneficial as a presentation. So I'm just bringing those up as topics.
Thank you. Thank you. So last call. I see none. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting and ask board members to remain. We will convene an executive session in 5 minutes.